The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture.
Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them. Hey everyone, good to be back. So what do you think about children not wearing shoes to school? Like, I'm talking straight up barefoot. And if you work in Montessori, what's your take on parent involvement? And I'm including moms and dads possibly hanging out in the classroom with the children. And then what's the role of academics, or more specifically test taking, in Montessori? So these are a few of the things that came up during a recent discussion I had with this longtime educator and parent, Bridget Dangel. I met her years ago at her own incredibly chill school. It's like way down south in a calm fishing community of the Florida Keys. Now, she's got over 25 years of experience in the field. And this is including over a decade running that successful, let's say, kind of islands vibe Montessori school of hers, which, interestingly, all three of her own children attended. So I think she has a unique perspective on what Montessori can be in practice. And I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. All right, Bridget Dangel, thanks for coming on the show and being with us.
Thank you, Jesse. It's great to be here.
So I visited your school. I was looking for potential schools, my wife and myself, to start ourselves. And yours came after a bunch, and it hit me as, oh, I like the feel of this place. This is the real deal. So just starting off here with the listeners out there, what's your school like? Like, what was a day like? What makes what you were doing something unique, or maybe this is what Montessori should be?
Well, I think when people say, like, what is Montessori to me, I think the first thing I want to express is it's a fulfilling and more engaging way of life. This isn't just a school for children to learn. It's a place for them to be and to grow and to develop. It's very family centered. My school was always very family centered, and we educated the whole child. We didn't just, as I say, teach them to read and write. We taught them to be really, I think, incredible people, gave them power to become that on their own.
Now, what's interesting is you were in a unique environment too, because you're out in the Keys. So do you think it had to do that you were able to focus on, hey, this is about living life with these children, getting them prepped for life, enjoying life, versus, this huge push for academics. You got to know their math. And it's just this stress on children. Do you think it had to do with where you were, or do you think you could do that in, like, the heart of New York City? What's your feel in that regard?
I think partially it is where we are here in the Florida Keys, this great system of islands that we live on. People have a slower mentality to them, a happier go lucky, maybe more trusting way of life. But I do know my school stood out. I drew parents for a reason. I was definitely known as the school that was different, offering a different advantage to children. So yeah, part of it, we have no shoes at my school, and that was great. That was very much living on the island lifestyle of being able to spend your day barefoot. Parents loved that as well, coming into the school and just feeling like we're at home.
Yeah, and that seems like, oh, there's just minor thing, but your school definitely had to feel like all the children and the adults that are kind of there, it's their home. But I mean, clearly in all Montessori, there's mixed ages, but do you think you were creating more of a home-like environment versus kind of these more corporate or business feeling schools? Not that business or corporations are bad, but you just get this generic feel for some Montessori schools today.
Absolutely. And I definitely kept my school away from that as much as I could. So when everyone arrived, I tried to incorporate once, Jesse, this drop-off service, like they do at some of the fancier schools. Maybe you can just drop your child as a valet service and go. And my parents did not like it. They enjoyed coming into the classroom each morning and spending a bit of time. I guess when I created this family-like environment, they came in. So the children would come in each day, Jesse, and they would just choose their lesson right away. Some would come in and finish breakfast. Some would come in and start reading a book. But it didn't really feel like it was a traditional classroom where it started and the bell rang. People would filter in, children would come. School started at 8, but by 8:30, everyone was there. Everyone was doing their own independent or in small groups lesson. So in that way, it felt like people were walking into their home.
So this is such an interesting, because I've seen so many schools, and one of the reasons I wanted you on was to kind of give people, hey, this is one approach to running a Montessori school. So I've seen this drop off the car line, then I've seen, oh, parents are talking at the door, so there's so many different ways, and I've seen both of them go well and pretty poorly. So do you think when the parents are dropping off, like let's say they're interacting with you or they see you, are you communicating with them at drop off? Are you having discussions or a pickup, or is that for other times with you?
I know some teachers would definitely say that that time was for the child, and I agree. But with the system I had, the children didn't want me right away. They wanted to engage in their classroom and in their environment, which often left the parents standing at the door. And I was there greeting them, of course, and I would end up talking to them. But most often I'd say, come on in, just make yourself at home.
Mm,
And so these children would be working. I would be, fluttering about, making sure the sponges were wet, ready for the practical life lessons, filling up the wash basins for them to wash their dishes in after they snack or have lunch. I had my things with my assistant to do, but the parents would usually just sit in awe and watch these children work. They sometimes would join their child, but not most often. The parents were good. They knew not to talk loudly to one another. They were in their children's space, and they really did respect that. It was nice. And I remember when parents thought the best thing to do was to leave without saying goodbye to their child, I would always say, no,
yeah.
no, no, no. Please go and say goodbye. That moment when they realize you're gone is not a settling moment. You have to tell them, even for the younger ones when it's hard. I do believe a formal goodbye is necessary.
Yeah, I wonder where that even began. It's kind of like the rip the band-aid off. You just like sneak out. It's like, when would you want that? Let's say with your
Ever.
partner or something. All of a sudden they just disappear. It's like, what?
And you're
Uh,
looking for them? That
yeah,
would
you're
be a
like, where the
terrible
hell did my
feeling.
wife go?
I know.
So I want to go back to this because it sounds so beautiful, right? You've got parents coming in, they're sitting, maybe having tea, looking at, but to a normal teacher out there, even some parents, it, it, it can seem bizarre. But I think it's mainly bizarre because we're in these normally structured classrooms, and there's this divide, and then management or the admin is the one who deals with parents. So what guidance or advice would you, I know you're doing some consult, what would you give to these teachers and even the administrations that are in more of a kind of corporate, or those settings where like there's a Publix or a Ralph's or some shopping thing and that's where the school's at? How can they start to get a little bit more relaxed in their environment where they might have the type of relationship or general environment where a parent could come in and just chill for a little bit, or at least start having a conversation at pickup? What kind of guidance could you give, if any?
I would say open your doors, an open door policy. I believe a parent has the right and the privilege to see where their children are each day. I believe Montessori is for the entire family. I never would believe a school is to be without a parent. I feel
Mhm.
so strongly about that, I guess. I don't know how we got to the point we are in our world where parents aren't welcome into a classroom. I don't care
Mm,
where your school is. Like, I'm not a huge, I love the beauty, the aesthetic factor of a beautiful school, of course. But I do believe you can create this type of place in any classroom, in any school. I think it just takes a little bit of trust for the teacher to open their door to their parents and help
yeah.
guide their parents to not be judgmental or not offer too much advice, just to be an observer. I think if you can design the structure, you can have anything you want, really.
Yeah. And I don't want to, I mean, I know there's a lot of teachers in admin. I don't want to scare anybody because it's like this, I think you were living somewhat of an ideal in a good way, like a practical ideal school out there. And then the development from some of the more structured and rigid to something like you were doing, I think it would take some time because it's just, we've kind of been bred into this view of this, oh, well, it's school and now separate. I'll even give you an example. Somebody was writing me asking about, they wanted to get into Montessori and be a teacher. And I was like, man, I'm so excited for your journey. But they didn't realize all of the training, not in Montessori, but the kind of extra requirement that each state requires of them. So you, like a grandma can't just cruise into a Montessori classroom and start hanging with the children. I mean, if she's a family member, yes, but let's say a grandma's like, hey, I want to be a substitute in your
Yeah.
classroom, Bridget.
Mhm.
That would be illegal in most states because she doesn't have her units. So
She
I
has to
think
be
it,
fingerprinted, right?
but not
Yes.
only that, some require them to have units of, child training or something. This is a grandma of like 10 grandchildren. Do they need to be trained by your local community college and how to be with children if they're a grandparent?
No,
You
I
know?
don't believe they do. I think too, having a private school, Jesse, has allowed me to do these
Mm,
things my way. Of course, I had to have my licensing with the state of Florida and the local licensing, and that was all fine. Of course, I didn't fit in exactly to their checklists and
mhm,
took some time and efforts to make a compromise in some areas. But as far as the parents coming in, I was clear in my parent handbooks. This is the kind of school we have. This is what you're signing up for. When parents came on tours, this is what we do. Children have access to the kitchen. They will go and get their snack and they'll come out and they'll eat it. They will carry glass plates and these plates will break and they will clean it up. So I think I'm pretty upfront with what is about to happen.
mhm.
And these parents know what they're signing up for.
Yeah.
It's hard
So
when you can't.
yeah, and I think that's why I want to be realistic about the actual environments that so many teachers and administrators find themselves in terms of just the kind of freedom of the adult to do the type of things, even no shoes and socks. I mean, that's a liability to some people. So I'm all about pushing to what works for the children and what works for the environment. So maybe even you're talking about the glass plate. So that's a great example of, like, in our little schoolhouse, we have the same where it's breakable things, but that can be scary to some parents and then definitely some teachers that are new to Montessori. How was that development for you? Like, were you just seemingly raised in an environment where you felt comfortable with that type of thing, or did you have to have a kind of transformation as an adult to see that children are capable of carrying real things instead of everything being plastic, of getting their own snack versus just the teacher plopping it down for everybody at the same exact time? Did you
Yeah.
have to
No,
develop into that, or was that just you? That's the
no,
person
that
you are.
wasn't me. My parents were great, but they were traditional. I
Mm,
was raised in the traditional school system, definitely didn't know anything about Montessori. I give 100% credit to my teacher training center. It was
mm,
Toronto Montessori Institute in Toronto, Canada. It was incredible. It was an 11-month program, 40 hours a week,
mm.
most intense year of my life. They asked us not to have a job or work while we did our studies. And I ended with 3 degrees, my, 3 to 6, age 6 to 9, and 9 to 12. So I ended up with my lower and upper elementary and my children's house. It was amazing. It was life transforming to the point where my husband now, who was my boyfriend at the time, was worried about me. He called it a cult at
Wow.
one point. Mind you, we were 22 years old, but
Mm,
it was life changing. I remember
yeah.
thanking my professors. I told them, like, you've changed who I am, the way that I push in a chair, the way that I observe the world around me. This is what changed in me.
That's fantastic. That transformation Montessori talks about it, and it is great. So just to give a shout out to, I don't know who your trainers were, but I'd love to just get their names out there since you're, if you
Now,
want.
Nancy Coyle, Rosanna Gaudio, Daniel Jutras, just incredible, inspiring
Awesome.
mentors.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just love to
thank
hear
you.
when somebody's so positive. Let's get them out there. So to people that are new to this, you said, it felt kind of like a cult, even to your boyfriend at the time. It can definitely feel cultish to people on the outside. And when you're going through it, maybe there's this excitement, like, oh, I want to tell everybody about it, which has that cult feeling, like, oh, now you're going to spread the gospel.
Yes, come with
So,
me.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, walk with me. I know the way.
Yes.
Um, do you have any guidance to new people that are getting to Montessori that are kind of, they're over the top excited? Like, I know there used to be, I'd see teachers all the time that were like 18, 19 years old, and they're telling parents of 5 kids how to parent, because they just got trained. Do you have any guidance to kind of enjoy it and do the growth and be pumped, but to tone it down if you're becoming Mr. Preachy out there to other people?
I would say lead by example. Know your audience, know how much you can talk about, get a planned parent education night when parents are coming to learn about levels of discipline within the Montessori child, then you can go ahead and read off your notes. But
Yeah,
when you're at a party or at the doctor's office, yeah, I think you need to find your elevator speech, your quick snippet of
yeah.
of what is important and what appeals to them. But I always invite. I remember when people used to call my school for a tour and they'd say, "What time can I come?" And I'd say, "You don't set up a time. You arrive. If you want to see a school for what it's worth and what it's really at, then you show up." I said, "I don't
Wow.
want you to plan a time. You just come." and
Mhm.
join us. I don't know. I think, and it just be patient. You can't do this all at once. It's going to take time. If you can be open to it and
Yeah.
take the time,
So
it'll happen.
it's wild hearing you because even that just like off the cuff, like, oh, if you just come by, like the idea of that, let's say you've got 300 children from infancy to eighth grade or something. It, that could be very problematic because even how does somebody give a tour if you don't know about infancy and eighth grade? So you had this beautiful environment. I don't want what I'm doing is I don't want to scare off people like, what? How would we do this? We have like 4 tours a day. But I see what you're saying because you just want to get across that this is not a formalized, we're going to show you the perfect setting when everything's going well. So I totally get that. Let me ask you this. Did you ever run into problems with that where a parent might show up and it's just one of those days when it's just kind of
No,
chaotic? You didn't have that.
no,
Okay.
no. And if it got chaotic, we did something different. You know, if it starts to get crazy, you go outside, you take a group to the garden, you bring your journals out to the chicken coop. I don't know. You just
Yeah.
have to stay one step ahead, I guess. No, I know it can be crazy. My school only had like 80 children, and so
Yeah.
it was manageable, I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah. And I think from my experiences, I've seen schools all the way from literally, I mean, we've got 8 kids in this little schoolhouse, and I've worked with schools all the way up to like 400 plus. And it really is what you do with it. But I think, Bridget, the fact that you had 80 children, like the 80 to 100 for me always seemed like that sweet spot. And then the the admin that were really really good, they basically break up their giant school into little mini schools almost right around that 80 mark because of what you're saying, where it can you can have these more casual interactions, you can adapt to what's going on. It's hard once you start getting the numbers higher and higher, but you can
That's
do it,
right.
but it gets tougher. So
And I also think the secret to the success, Jesse, would be keeping the same families for a long time.
mm,
Thinking about our podcast today, I put a lot of thought into the families. And I guess let me back up. It took me aback when we discussed this podcast topic, and it was hard for me to come up with an example or a thought on children that thrived in my school or why my school stood out as something a little maybe different or offered something more. I thought it was normal. I thought my school was the exact same pretty much as every other school out there. I thought every child was given the same opportunity. So I never really thought it was spectacular. I thought it was normal. Um, and it didn't take until like years after a family left or a child graduated that they'd see me and remind me. And it really opened my eyes over the years. And thinking about today's podcast really made me realize, wow, I think it was pretty amazing. So thank you for
yeah.
this conversation today. I'm seeing my own school in a different light, I guess.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think that's one of the advantages. And I tell teachers this, I tell parents this, do your research. And as you're a teacher, even for yourself to go out and see, because, Bridget, it's very possible at times, maybe there's some little thing that you weren't doing amazing. And if you go out and observe other classrooms, you might pull that in. You'd be like,
Yes.
wow, she did this. So I just tell people, I just experience and observing school after school after school, you get a good sense of what's working and what's not. So again, that's one of the reasons I want to keep in contact with Bridget here is because of that, because you really did. You walk into your environment, it just feels like I want to be here. I want to be playing with these materials.
I can tell you, our parents absolutely loved it. I remember locking up at the end of the day and saying, okay, all you parents out on the playground, still with your children, I am leaving. So you're going to have to go through the gate and close the gate when you go. But it is getting dark. Like I'm going home. And they would stay, these parents
Yeah.
were funny. But we had such incredible parents. And again, because I spent some of them 8, 9 years with me between
Yeah.
siblings. These children a lot came in the infant toddler age, and then they left at the end of grade 3 when my elementary not-for-profit school that I started ended. I grew that school on the request of these parents. I had
Yeah.
originally went to Children's House Montessori Academy, and then they all came to me and said, "We will be your board. We will help you. This is what we need. We need you to start in elementary." So I guess having that support of those parents meant the world. Really, I don't know if it
Yeah.
could have been like this without them.
I would say I don't think so because from my experience too, it's like what you're saying. if you get the parents as excited as the children to be there, then you've got, I mean, it's gold. It's like, that's what we all want, a community with all of us.
Job. Yeah, for us to do our job well, we have to include the family, don't we?
Yeah, I agree. And I love what you're saying because at the end of the day, the parents are on the playground and we're not pushing them. It all of a sudden it becomes like, oh my God, this is fun. This is a good time. I want to stay.
This is a space for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that feeling of it's almost like you can relive your childhood with the children, and for some people, maybe they didn't have that bright of a childhood. So it's even more spectacular to be out there running around with the kids. And again, I don't want to harp on this, but we're becoming too formalized with Montessori. It's becoming too like, oh, I know what this cookie cutter looks like. So let me just make another one in a different city. And it's the same generic thing.
Yeah,
So that's another reason why I really wanted to emphasize and bring you on is show people there's different ways to do this stuff, you know?
there is. And if
Um,
parents are on board, there's no limit. There's just endless opportunity. I had some parents I know say to me when I see them in our town that we live in, just I ran into an old parent the other day and she said, Bridget, I sometimes feel very sad for the families of this town who never had your school, who never had the opportunity to go to Montessori Academy. And I thought, well, that's funny. I know parents have told me their discipline. A lot of the parents would tell me their discipline styles changed. And, parents who didn't agree with my philosophies or my suggestions, they often wouldn't stay for a long time. And that's okay too. But for the
yeah.
families that did, they would stand out within their own families as now this family that doesn't discipline in the same way, or they'll listen to their child. And a bunch of the families years ago used to say when they were frustrated at home with their parents, they'd say, what would Bridget say? What would
Nah,
Bridget, and so I think that's funny. And
yeah.
again, I never really thought much of it.
Yeah, no, and I mean, hearing you say that there is a way that if you're living the kind of way that you think is good, and you're not out there like with a megaphone saying, you all need to follow this. It's interesting how people tend to want your aid when they saw the kids in your school. They
Yeah.
interacted with the parents at your school at some gathering. And like, wow, these people like this school. Let me go check it out. And then they start asking you questions like, well, can you help me with my child? Versus this feeling like you are bad if you don't do it this way.
No,
It's kind of moralizing.
I would ask for 75% commitment to parent education nights if possible. There is no
Mhm.
discipline if that couldn't happen. But I'd also say if you're not able to come, send a grandparent, send a neighbor, send a babysitter, send whoever. Let's just get this. I didn't say this, but I was thinking it. Let's get the word out there as much as we can. And
Yeah.
I realized I never advertised. People would say you should advertise. And I was like, no, I know it's a small town, Key Largo. It's not a huge town, but there were quite a few preschools in our town and
Yeah.
a couple of Montessori schools, believe it or not. But I never had to advertise. It was that word of mouth and keeping that same group of parents year after year. You weren't really looking for enrollment, I guess.
It's interesting because I think things are changing now just because, you for most people out there are listening, Montessori is not trademarked. So you could literally, put up a school and put Montessori on it and
Mhm.
you got a school, even if you're doing nothing that's Montessori. So I think there's a lot more competition. And let's say, Bridget, the school next to you was open from 7 to 6 versus, I don't know, what were your hours back then? Do you remember?
It was 8 to 5.
Yeah, 8 to 5, and somebody's 7 to 6, and they have Montessori in their name. So um, it becomes a little bit more challenging. But I'm with you. I think at the end of the day, it's the product. What are you doing? Is it good or is it crappy? And I
Yeah.
and I think that's what sells.
It's
Ultimately.
what the school's willing to do for their families too. I actually opened at 7:15. I would have one teacher go in at 7:15 and it was only for the teacher kids. The local high
Mm,
school and the traditional school teachers often would send their kids to me. I had teacher kids always, and they started work early. So I accommodated them. I said, I will find you a staff member who will come in and leave earlier each day. And they'd have about 7 kids from 7:15 to 8. And
mm.
they would just help get the school prepped. They were teacher kids, so I guess they were used to it anyways.
Yeah, so you're kind of adapting, which again, you might need
Exactly.
to do this if you're an admin out there, a school owner. So one thing
Yes.
I do want to ask you, because thinking about your interactions with parents, it seems like you had great relationships. Again, you're in a unique area. The keys are kind of the people that go there, they go there for a reason. What happened with academics? Because I don't want to say, oh, we're just hanging out, we're having this lovely time, and children aren't learning anything. So maybe this is a two-part question. What were the kids learning? Because children should learn a lot and love to learn. And then did you get any pushback from parents or questioning around, are my children learning anything?
Well, fortunately for me, prior to me starting my school, I was the assistant principal at a Montessori charter school, quite a
Mhm.
larger school in town. And I was there for 8 years. So, as a teacher and then the assistant principal. So, I actually helped create the curriculum that correlated the Montessori standards with the Florida State curriculum. So therefore, I had all of like everything was documented. I was really great that way. And so were my teachers. No parent ever asked to see it, but it allowed us to create amazing progress reports to show their child's status, where they are on the Florida level and then also in the Montessori level. We didn't hold a high standard to grades. We didn't discuss it. It was more of a graded system of a 1, 2, 3, or 4, so they knew where their child was. And kindergarten aged up, I offered the parents the chance to do the testing if they wanted, and I would
Hmm.
administer a state test for those children. But if the parent wasn't interested, then they wouldn't.
Hmm.
They had learned so much, learning was not a problem. Maybe
And
there's occasionally a child who didn't learn as quickly or as well, but given time, you give that 3-year cycle, as Montessori says, I don't believe there's much room for failure.
so why don't you do this? Like, I'm curious because if some other parent could be out there being like, well, this all sounds kind of good, but what are they learning? What were some of the children learning? You're talking about the
Okay,
3 to 6 environment, or maybe the 6 to 9. Like, give me some examples of some quote academic work.
I will give you some examples.
Nice.
My one of my favorite memories is a boy named Devin. This boy couldn't get enough of grammar and identifying the parts of speech. For 2 years, he would come in and excitingly start his day with choosing a grammar box. And he would symbolize not only sentences, but he would ask me to symbolize poetry and stories. He couldn't get enough. And so then when he finished all of the boxes, he asked me if he could start teaching the younger children. So he became the grammar teacher for that 3rd year that I had him. It was amazing. I thought for sure he would grow up to be an author or a professor. He didn't. He's a fisherman today, but he loved grammar, and that was really cool. I'll always think of him when I present grammar lessons.
What's cool about this story too is so much of this work, like this excitement with grammar. So this fisherman now probably could like, dissect somebody's essay or something. But
Yes.
I think people get the wrong sense of what so much of this work is about. Like he got into grammar and he's excited with learning, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be his chosen work or it's going to be some direct relationship with his final career choice in life.
Yeah.
But isn't that like there's this feel I remember in high school, like, are you going to go on a college track or are you going to go on the prep? And so everything was around preparing you for this very specific thing. And you're like, how do you know at 5 or even 13? How do you know exactly what you're going to do? You
You
know, you,
don't have to. I think we need to stop pressuring our children to know. That's also what the grades offer in the classroom is this end result. Children don't learn with this end result. That's an adult mind who
yeah.
focuses on the end outcome. A child is into the process. So for Devin doing grammar, celebrate that moment. Don't try to figure it out because it really doesn't make much sense why he loved grammar more than any other child. But it doesn't matter. The fact is he loved it and then he left it. And maybe today, once in a while, he'll think about it. That's all we need to know, I think.
So what would you do with the children? I mean, you're using grammar here, but let's take math or reading or some other where you've got Devin as this great, he's so pumped, but a child who just, I don't want to do math. I
Mm.
don't want to do that. And of course, I mean, to some extent, we do need grammar, we do need math, we need to be able to read. So what would you do with a child or children like that in some subject area?
Well, I think of Allison with math. She never truly picked up math concepts easily, but she was always that child reading a chapter book before she should have been. So
Yeah.
she rejected a lot of the Montessori math lessons, but the one she would reluctantly choose when I prompted her to choose something from the math area would be the 100 board. So she would do it, and she could do it in her sleep, just laying out the first presentation, the 1 to 100. And then I realized, okay, she doesn't like the skip counting bead chains. What am I going to do? So I started to like, she'd come in the morning and I'd have just a little stack of the tiles there on the 100 board. And she'd kind of look at me and I'd say, try it. And then she realized, oh, I'm skip counting by sixes, or I'm
Mm.
skip counting by threes. And then she started to see these patterns, Jesse, and she got super excited. She'd see like the diagonal patterning of when you count by sixes, or the tens all are on the far right column, or in the middle, the fives all end with a 0 or a 5. And this became exciting for Allison. And then it kind of turned for her. She was more open to math after that.
So what do you say? Because I mean, I've seen this countless times over the years now, but what do you say to the parent or even to the kind of nascent new teacher who's there's a fear my child's not going to do math, my child's not going to read? We've seen it through the years. You see the end result, but what do you say to the new Bridget when Bridget just started, or to the parent who's really concerned and stressing the teacher out, stressing their child out about math or reading? Like, what do you say to them to be like, let's take a chill, but let's chill out a little bit? How do you do it?
I'd say understand that there's a reason for this. There's something that doesn't allow them to go to it with ease. So be patient. The more you push, the more they're going to reject you. Be creative, right? Montessori says our job is to almost like be like a jester and just make it exciting and attractive. My job is to find the way to get through to that child. Be patient. Know that there's a reason that they're like that, and know that it's possible to come out of that. Just find the way to do it.
And it's interesting you say patience as one of those things. And that's, I mean, walking into your school, and this is years ago now. It must have been like, maybe, I don't even know how long ago that was, maybe
Five or
4 years.
six, maybe,
Yeah,
right?
maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
So I still remember the feeling of just, oh, this is a place where we can just relax. So it's that feeling of there's patience. I'm not going to be rushed. Whatever we're doing here, this is going to be relaxed. I think that kind of that feel as a child, you really absorbed that. I think that came across in your school, even the short time I was there. So,
Nice. I think patience alongside being non-judgmental. We need to
yeah.
teach children to stop being judgmental and stop comparing yourself to the other children. Sally might be strong at this, but George is so strong at this. Let's celebrate each other's strengths instead of
Oh,
comparing ourselves to each other and making it a difference. Everyone will get to the end line at some point. Today at school, I kind of asked a classroom I was in to diminish the need for a line leader. Oh,
mm,
I don't know that when a teacher designates as a line leader, it's like designating that A to that best top student. Let's display their work at the front of the room. Stop making it important to be the first person in line. Let's instead make it important that we're all getting to the same place in a
mm.
different position within that line, instead of fighting to get to your spot. I'm the line leader. I'm sad when I hear children reacting that way.
Yeah, this is, it's so
Sorry, I
funny
went
because
off
this
on
is,
a tangent, but that
no, but I think it's a good tangent because I think it's another example of how children are absorbing what we say every single day, even though we don't know. Like, where does the idea of wanting to be the first in line come from? Like, oh, you're the first.
the day we're doing our job well is the day that no child needs to be first in line. That's why I love it when I dismiss children from class. I say, okay, everyone, go line up. And at first, it's a little crazy, right? Because everyone just doesn't really know what to do. And they're all like trying to form this line. But just sit back and watch it happen. They figure it out much better and much more quickly than the adult telling them, you go first, now you, now you, now you. Or
Yeah.
finding ways to say, if you're wearing green today, go line up. And then you get a group of them to go. Or if you have 7 letters in your name, go line up.
Yeah.
Just don't pinpoint. I think it's unnecessary. I really do.
And even in doing that, you're aiding them in learning something. Like you're talking numbers there with 7 letters, or the sound that your name starts with this sound. So
Yeah.
I feel like you and I could chat for hours about all of this stuff. I want to make sure because we got to head out soon. So, is there anything you want to get in that I did not ask you about where you can just say, "Hey, I want this in here."
Maybe a bit about parent volunteers, like outside of the box, maybe.
Yeah, no, go for it.
I just wanted to throw out some examples of what parents have been able to provide our school over the years and helping to make it so successful. Parents would come in who were yoga teachers and want to give some yoga classes, or parents would want to come and speak about their native country that they've come from. Or one mom who was an Eastern medicine doctor, once she came to the school and she took the kids out to the playground and she taught them how to scrape gumbo limbo bark and then go boil it in the kitchen. What they were doing was making a paste for my co-teacher who had a reaction to poison wood. So she taught the kids
Mhm.
how to make a salve or a treatment for this poison wood. It was pretty cool. We had a lot of charter fishermen over the years, and they would take our kids out fishing or to marine labs. Once we actually had Buddhist monks come into our school and they performed a yak dance and built sand mandalas with our class. That was pretty amazing.
Oh,
And of course, the parents that have horses around here, they would invite us to their homes. One mom showed up with a horse on the playground. The kids went to the playground one day, and then she had this little miniature horse out on the playground. That was fun. I'll end with the last example of this
uh,
couple that we had for maybe 5 years. They would come for half of the year. They'd split their time with their daughter between New York City and the Keys. And they were Broadway Lion King dancers and
wow.
had been
Okay.
for like 15 years. Like it was their career. We became very close with the school. And they taught the class one year a dance performance and taught them all the dance moves and did costumes
Oh,
and makeup,
wow.
and then we performed it at a local theater. So you can imagine
Oh
grades
my
1
God.
through 3, 25 kids dancing. It was phenomenal. And thanks to these parents who just wanted to share their love of dance.
Yeah, and it's great because these kids get to experience, oh, this is what adults are doing out there. Because usually the context is, your own parents' jobs, but what are
Mhm.
other people out there in the world doing? That's
Exactly.
cool.
And I guess just one last example, like,
Go
she's
for it.
got to show her passion, right? She's got to bring that passion she has into the classroom. And mine, I was a English poetry major at university, and I love poetry. So I always share that in my classrooms. And my best memory was the little girl I taught, Annabelle. Annabelle fell in love with, obviously, Edgar Allan Poe's poem, Annabelle Lee. And in grade 2 or 3, she memorized this entire poem, and it's quite long. And she asked me if she could go to the high school and recite this poem to her sister's English class,
Uh,
which she did. And she had it memorized, like thinking, wow, what a child can do with a teacher's passion that's shared to her, where she could bring that herself. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I wish more people could see your school now. What's the outcome of the school, by the way? Is it still functioning there? What's going on with that school?
It is functioning. When I was invited to come to Thailand and teach for a couple of years at an international school, while I was there, the property sold. And so the
Mm,
person who bought the property offered to buy my business. So
okay.
I reluctantly let it go. It was 12 years I had it. It served its purpose. I raised my 3 children there and hundreds and hundreds of children in this community. I did work as a consultant for the new owners for some time, created
Okay.
curriculum for them. They still have some of the teachers that I had back then. So it's still doing well. Happy to hear.
Awesome. And then, so Bridget, jumping out here, I just want to make sure if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best site for them to go to or an email address?
Okay, so it would be consult
Okay.
dot Montessori essentials at gmail.com.
Okay. Consult.montessoriessentials@gmail.com. Is that right?
You got it. That's the
Okay,
proper
cool.
one.
All
Jesse.
right. Reach out to Bridget. I'll add that to the podcast episode page. So if you guys want to get a hold of Bridget, just email her. She loves
Thank
talking
you.
Montessori and she's got a lot of good stuff to share. So
Definitely would love to help any school or offer some conversation with anybody who wants to talk. Thank you, Jesse.
cool. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Bridget, for coming on. I'm glad I found your school years ago and came to meet you and what you created.
I'm really glad I got to meet you as well. At the time when we first met, I just thought you were someone looking to buy a school, and I'm glad I got to realize the amazing work you do as well in Montessori. So it's really an honor to know you. And thank you for having me on today.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate you saying that. So we will talk again, no doubt.
All right. All the best, Jesse.